Good day and welcome to your favorite show, Be the Best You Can Be, on your number one hit music station, EBIS2. I am your dear brother in Christ, Ishmael Spesihle Kumalo. This is the time we gather together as young people to interact, to help each other be the best version of what God has set out for us to accomplish here on earth. I bring you technical greetings from Pomuzi Sitsebe and Laki Dlamini, and it is with great delight to also be partnering with our technical team from the International Family Church to make sure that this show comes to you and you get to hear us and be a blessing to you. If you're listening to the show for the very first time, this is a youth show that seeks to empower, to minister hope, and to encourage young people, to equip young people to carry out their God-given assignment, to be distinct, walking dominion and divine destiny as purposed by God. In very simple English, we exist as a show to see to it that you live a purpose-driven life. We don't want you to just exist. We want you to thrive. We want you to be a person who is living driven by purpose. So that's why we exist as a show. And in today's show, I am delighted that I'm not riding solo. I have a guest in studio with me, and we are going to discuss a lot of things. One of the things that we want to discuss is just issues of politics. We want to discuss ministry. And we want to discuss how difficult it must be to be dealing with sick people as a medical doctor, aspiring at least. Ms. Khanyisa, how are you doing today?
Thank you, Mr. Kumalo. I am well, thank you. How are you today?
No, life is good. Just want to draw your mic closer to you. But tell us about yourself. For somebody who doesn't know who you are, who is Khanyisa? What are you about? Do you love football? Do you love umiso? Who are you?
Okay. So my names are Khanyisa Nhlabatsi. I do quite a lot of things, but for simplicity's sake, let's just say I am a young girl who is saved, who is currently in medical school, currently in my 5th year. I am also a SADC Youth Parliamentarian. I have co-founded a leadership development center in Zambia, where I spent most of my time because of school, obviously. But I also have recently founded what we call her Circle of Light. And that's just about it.
Okay, let's start about Khanyisa. You find yourself right now in the season of your life in Zambia pursuing your medical studies. How did that passion come about?
Well, that is quite a complex journey, but if I may say, it has not always been a dream to become a doctor eventually, but that does not mean I don't have the passion for it. So my mother is a nurse, and I think growing up I used to admire seeing, not knowing everything to do when somebody is sick and being able to take care of everybody. It was quite admirable to see her do those things, but as I was growing up and I was finding my own feet, I joined debate and public speaking, and I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. But as, things progressed that I grew up, I figured that, there might be, more into the health sector as opposed to the speaking and everything, because that's what fascinated me about debate and public speaking. But there was also the aspect of making real impact and helping people. And so I thought, maybe let's try out the health sector. And what she used to tell us is, if any of you guys would be interested in health, do not become a nurse. And so that left me with a few options, and I think medicine is the one that sort of stood out then.
With my very limited, naive understanding of the medical field, there are many fields within that field. So which one would you want to ultimately specialize in?
Okay, that's a tough question. That's a tough question because, as you progress with the studies, sometimes you find something that you think you like, and then you meet something else that you think you like better than that. So it's always like a changing, it always changes from time to time. But by far, I think if I were to specialize, I would specialize in internal medicine. And in layman's language, internal medicine is like these, let's say this department that deals with the normal sicknesses, or let me say the chronic conditions, the heart conditions, your diabetes, your liver conditions, stomach aches, a lot of those things that are not bleeding or surgery or obs and gyn. It's just essentially the diseases that are usually chronic and that people deal with every day.
Am I correct in understanding you to be saying that you wouldn't want to work in a surgery and opening people up?
Absolutely.
So even doctors do find something scary?
No, it's not scary. Well, I'm not fascinated by the long hours of, standing in theater. And it's not about the cutting people up, but I find that it's a bit intense and it's the same thing over and over. It's just routine. Somebody comes, we cut, we open, we do this and that. Over time, it becomes, a routine. Whereas in internal medicine, when somebody comes and presents to you with a headache and they're vomiting, it could be anything. You have a lot of differentials running through your mind because it could be any condition really. And I find that fascinating because constantly you need to be up to date, you need to be reading because it could be anything. Yeah.
This is definitely a youth show, so I want us to track back before you moved to Zambia. One, how did you discover the university in Zambia? Two, what were the requirements that you needed to fulfill to be eligible for medical studies in Zambia?
Okay. So ideally, I thought I wanted to study my medicine in South Africa, like every other young Swazi mostly. But when I finished school, I find myself having been exposed to, other nationalities at Gazakali where I went. And the Zambian community was an interesting group of people because they were particularly hardworking and devoted in everything that they did. And to me, that really sparked an interest in, how do these people actually live and where they come from and where they learn and stuff like that. And so when I finished school, I now had to stop and think if I really did still want to continue going to SA or this is an option I would like to explore. And luckily enough, I had friends who were already in Zambia.
Swazi friends.
Yes, Swazi friends who were already in Zambia, and so they hooked me up, and that's how I found myself in Zambia.
What were the academic requirements?
Academic requirements, you needed to have a B plus and above in your maths and your sciences. That would be your physics and biology, depending on the syllabus that you're doing.
Do you find it easy to study outside the country? If not, what are some of the challenges that you have to contend with?
Okay. Studying outside the country is a combination of both, to be honest. I like to see every circumstance or opportunity as an opportunity for a person to grow. So you can't entirely say that it's bad, you can't entirely say that it's good, but there's something to learn from it. And so from my experience, learning outside the country, first of all, helps you to grow because you realize that I have nobody in this place but myself, and so I need to learn to woman up if you're a woman, of course. And you need to be responsible because you find that in most cases, if you grow up at home and everything is at home, sometimes the growing up happens at a very slow rate because if I finish up my rental money, I can always call my parents, so come and get me, or they'll give you the money. But if you're in a foreign land, you know that if you be irresponsible in whatever manner, no one is coming to save you.
Yeah.
So there's that. But on the difficult part, of course, there are instances where you get exploited for being a foreigner in most cases because the assumption is that you have sustain yourself. So those are some of the challenges that you find that you face as you live in a foreign country, and sometimes you have to explain yourself a lot to many people because some of them it is fascinating to meet a foreigner the same way we feel about foreigners, and so it's a combination of both really.
And do you have support in terms of, do you have other locals that you can lean on in times of difficulty, or it's all you, yourself, or me, myself, and I kind of situation?
Okay. What I love about Swazis, what I've seen so far is whenever whenever we're in the country, we have our own spaces, just do your own thing, I'll do mine. But when you meet in a foreign space, there's that sense of brotherhood that usually develops amongst yourselves where you look out for each other. I may not like you, but you're from home and I'm supposed to look out for you. And that sort of like creates a cushion for you to always know that at least you do have someone whenever you need something. And I think that there's that with the Swazis, and that's a good thing.
There's an impoverished or somebody who comes from a disadvantaged background listening to us now. They aspire to go into medical school or pursue the medical field. What will be your pearls of wisdom to that person as they pursue what they feel God is calling them to do?
Okay. From an impoverished background, well, with the Christian aspect of it, first of all, I would say this is the part where you really have to demonstrate an absolute belief and trust in God, because of that great background, it creates certain limitations already, and makes certain things a little more harder for you than anybody else. And so the first aspect, of course, would be demonstrating an absolute trust and belief in God. But also, I would think that you would want to find or explore opportunities that would help give financial aid, because that is definitely a requirement. You can't just go on a leap of faith and think some miracle or money will fall from heaven. It doesn't work like that. And so you would want to explore options of how you can, attain that financial aid. In the past, we used to have, the guarantee of scholarship, but they have shrinked because of economy issues. And so there's that. So you really want to have those things on the line. But also, those are not the only two requirements. You need to be very good at your work, because you may not have the necessary aids for you to get there. But if you have what it takes and you're good enough, people will recognize that, and they will open doors for you because they want someone who is good enough.
Let's talk about your ministry now, your ministry journey, because I find it fascinating, and I think you are a good example of what I normally teach, in the sense that often at times we feel a sense of calling on our lives, and we assume we need to have a pulpit or should plant a church or stuff like that. But you guys nowadays are showing us that you can be called and not have a pulpit, but still touch lives. Tell us about the ministry that you guys are involved with, that you've co-started, and what is that all about?
Okay, so the ministry that you're referring to is what we call Her Circle of Light. And of course, it's not a platform to preach, but it's a community of young Christian women who are committed to their walk with God and seek to do better. And the inspiration for that comes from the mere fact that, from observation, at least in our setting at Eswati, we have observed instances where our young lady who we look up to in the church is very devoted and is on fire for the Lord, and they go away to school, and when they come back, we can almost not recognize the person that left and the one who has returned now. And so that sort of created an interest in me, also coming from a background where, there's family issues as well, that, there could be problems, or there could be, something that happens between the period when the person left and the period that they come back. What is it exactly that they go through where we are not seeing them, where the church is not there, where their families are not there, that often causes them to then stray away from the path? And how can we involve ourselves in that particular period and try to help each other as Christians? Because it's very hard, to be honest, and especially speaking from a university point of view. When you get there, there's so many things that you may have not seen when you're at home at the comfort of your families and your brothers and sisters and everything. And when you're there, there's a lot of exposure that goes on. And if you're not strong enough, I have seen Christians who then let go of who they've always been because they're trying to fit in, or they are trying not to look uncool, or they're trying just to, have friends, because we all need company. You can't do life by yourself. And so there's also those certain things that you need to do to keep up with those friendships. And some of them, slowly but surely, you may not notice, but it's very easy for that person to then stray away. And so now Her Circle of Light provides that, is a community that sort of provides that, that fellowship that allows us to walk through this journey of faith together. We understand the things that you're going through, but we also want to refer to everything that we do and aspire and anchor them on what Scripture says. What does God have to say about dating? What does God have to say about the friendships and how we pick our friends? What does God have to say with our associations with non-believers? Where do we draw the line, and all of those things? And it really does help, because on your own, it may be very difficult. It's only a few people who manage to sustain that fire for God and when they come back. And so we decided that, having a platform like this should really help a lot of us. Where you're struggling with something, you can actually find that there's one of us in this group who has gone through that as well, and they'll be able to share how they went through, that journey, and be able to mentor you through that journey. And it won't be just as difficult as it would have been if you were on this by yourself.
Let's talk about the vision now. This is a noble initiative, but how far do you want this to go, as far as, because I can imagine that right now it's currently at the university where you are in Zambia, but the need is in literally every university.
Yeah.
What's the vision? How far do you want it to go?
Well, it's very broad, and sometimes when we think of it, there's actually the four of us who started this together. When we think of it, it's very overwhelming, and it can be crippling to think about how are we going to get there. Yes, we aim to do A, B, C, and D, but how are we going to get there? But the long-term vision of it, obviously, we seek to create homes or establish, because, me being in Zambia and also being in Swaziland, there's also need to be able to meet needs both here and there, and so that already makes it an international international sort of community. And so in the long-term vision, we would seek to have homes in both countries where, because for now we are online because of geographical reasons, we would want to have homes where there's a physical meetings that happen in Zambia and physical meetings that happen in Swaziland. But there's also, a need to reach out to people who are not saved, because for now we are, dealing with people who are saved and are walking through this journey together, and they have challenges. But we also do want to later on reach out to those who are not saved and help them walk through that journey. And that requires a lot of finances, resources, in terms of how do we get to them and how do you make sure that they feel wanted, they feel loved. And if you're talking about mentoring them as in a one-on-one program, it's a bit difficult doing that online, because for you to mentor me, I need to see you, I need to like you. You can't just match me with somebody that I don't know, because in as much as we're all Christians, there's also an aspect of personality. Do we actually, do we feel each other when we talk? Do I feel like I can actually talk to you, or you're too loud for me, or you're too quiet for me? And so most of these things would require that, would actually be able to have physical meetings and have activities that allow us to bond and that allow us to be able to open up without the fear of being judged, the fear of being isolated. And mostly that comes with physical interactions, which is our biggest challenge right now. But also in the long term, we do seek to, by God's grace, open up facilities like orphanages and offer scholarships to those who are unable to afford to go to universities, because in as much as we are focused on the Christian journey, we are also interested in people progressing in their own individual lives, because in order for you to, to drive in life, you need to have cash to do this and that. And so those are some of the things that we are looking at rather as our long-term vision.
I normally say to people, a vision is from God when it's so big that it scares you. Because if it's just so small, then we can achieve it in our own strength and abilities. But if it's so big and it scares us, then we have to totally rely on God. And kudos to you guys for having such a big vision. And it is my sincere prayer that even the adults that are listening to this show now will find it fit to want to get in touch with you and want to support this in one way or the other. And talking about support, who are the people that are currently supporting you, and how can someone else support you if they're not already in the bandwagon, as it were?
Shockingly, so far it's a very small, fellowship or community. Like I mentioned, most of the things that we do are usually online, and so we have not been able to do any, physical meetings or any of these things that we wish to do, where we go to communities and we help and all of that, because of the financial restrictions. And so far we don't have partners, but we try to use our own monies here and there wherever necessary, because we understand that this comes with the love and passion and with the what it's at the end of the day, it's not about us, so it's about God. And whenever you give where God is concerned, it will always come back to you. And so we do try to use our own resources and try to make the most of it so far. But we would love that in the near future we would have support wherever we can.
So who would be ideal in supporting you? And when I say, what sort of people are you looking to partner with? And I'm not talking in terms of money, because support comes in many ways. And if we restrict it to money, then we are limiting ourselves. But what sort of profile of a person would you want to have as a supporter?
Well, we would be looking for, let's say, people who, of course, have a Christian background, but also understand the need to, we're looking for people who would obviously contribute in the Christian sector, because this is what this is all about, but we will also be hopeful that they would be able to meet the needs of these people, because like we mentioned, it's not everybody that comes that has their life figured out. The people who come from different backgrounds and they have different needs. In the Bible, there's a verse that talks about if you want to help someone, you don't only speak to them about the gospel. Start first by meeting their needs physically, and then they'll be able to receive whatever it is that you have to share with them. And so we would be looking to partner with people or the church or organizations that will also be able to meet those needs, because it's not just about sharing the word throughout and helping people in that journey, but it is also concerns about what people are going through. It could be mental health, it could be physical needs, clothes, food, shelter, or, it could be, as broad as it could possibly be, because we understand that the backgrounds are not the same, and, other people wish to be a part of this community, but they have certain restrictions, and we are also unable to meet those things. And so partnering with people that understand that and also of a Christian background would be of help to us, because we also do not then want to find ourselves deviating from the main vision because we're trying to chase this partnership.
Yeah.
So there's also that.
Is this open to any person from any denomination?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And strictly for college-going students?
Between the ages of 18 to 25. So you could be in college, you could be waiting to go to college, slightly past. And the reason for this is because we try to tackle issues that are specific to a certain age group. Because, like, let's say in some of the sessions that we've had, we were talking about a biblical approach to dating. And so if the age group is not defined and it is very broad, you can find that there's somebody who likes the initiative and they're actually 35. But they're not interested to hearing about godly dating because they're probably married, or they feel like, well, my time has passed. I'm not interested in learning about these things. Tell me, how do I go back in time to find this particular person? And so we try to restrict it to this age group because we understand that most of the challenges that we are focusing on are in this age group between the ages of 18 to 25, because that's the part where you're trying to discover yourself, who you are, what you love, what you want to do. You're trying to find a life partner. You're trying to find friends. But how do you sift these friends from the ones who are non-Christians and are Christians? What if you meet people who help you thrive in your academics but are non-believers? What do you do in those particular cases? And you find it's in this age group. Of course, the younger ones could, but we feel we are more relevant to particularly between ages of 18 and 25.
You spoke about the fact that most of these young people, when they leave home, they're fired up for God. They go to college, and college happens. And they just lose the passion. They lose the zeal for God. In your view, what are some of the reasons why these people lose, or what are some of the things that extinguishes the fire, as it were, when they get to college or when they leave high school?
Depending on where these people find themselves, particularly, of course, in the context of college, you find that when people leave from their homes, the struggles of finding a church. They struggle to find a church that speaks to them, a church that they can identify with. Apart from just finding a church, they also struggle to find their feet in that particular church. Like, let's say wherever you're coming from in your church you used to serve, you come to this church and you find that it's a long process to actually get to the point where I can serve. And what that does is, first of all, you become idle, you don't do anything, and the fellowship does not necessarily mean much to you anymore, because you don't feel that I'm being accepted in this environment. You don't feel that I'm able to find my feet. And so slowly you begin to, I do go to church, but and others resort to attending services online, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But what I've discovered in my own personal journey is that there's a huge difference between fellowshipping with other brethrens and watching, because when you watch, of course you are learning, but when you fellowship with others, you will learn other aspects of God through other believers, through other people's testimonies, through other people's songs. And those are some of the things that will fan into flames this desire for God that you already have. And so those are some of the few, this is how usually it starts, and then people drift. It's other cases you find that maybe, let's say, in a dorm where I stay, I have non-believers as my roommates. I didn't choose them. And maybe they drink and they smoke and they live a wayward life. Of course, I can't tell them to change that because it's their life. But you find that an exposure to these things over and over and over, I become less insensitive to this way of living. And I actually find out, why do you guys drink? Why do you guys do these things? And they'll tell you, it helps us forget about stuff, and it helps us to, there's nothing wrong with it. And you begin to accept that. Not that you do it, but you begin to understand, this is how they live, and, it's okay to also do those things. And before you know it, after time, maybe you go through challenges yourself, and you think, maybe let me just get a bottle of alcohol. I mean, my friends told me, Guti, it helps you forget stuff, so let me try it out. And then you find that you do that thing once, and then you meet other friends and who are in that space, and slowly but surely you drift further and further and further. It started by being in an environment that made you understand the wrong things. So that continuous exposure causes you to become less sensitive, and eventually this is something that you would do and you find nothing wrong with it. And so, plus, if let's say you also had that church experience where you're not able to find a church, or you're not able to serve in that church, or you're unable to participate, and so slowly you begin to drift in the shadows, to drift in the background, and you begin to live life like any other normal, ordinary person, and slowly but surely you find that the fire has gone. Now when it's time to go back home, you think, at home they know that I'm on fire for God, so now I have to you start by living a double life, but sometimes you find that other people get tired of living the double life. They just eventually choose one. And the sinful life is pretty much easier to choose than the godly one. And so you find that people fall back, or you live that double life over and over until God exposes you, and that's just it.
I got some serious slack for being the kind of pastor that doesn't wear suits. And I told somebody recently, and I say this with all sincerity, when my wife and I first got married, we moved to Durban, as most people would know. And I was running away from my calling at the time. I just didn't want to be a teacher anymore. I just didn't want to. So we moved to Durban to run away from the calling. I wanted to do corporate. I did corporate. And we went to this one particular church, young married couple, no car, broke as hell. And then we were not accepted. Not because we were not eloquent enough, not because we didn't pray enough, not because of any spiritual disciplines that we lacked, purely on the basis that we didn't have certain resources such as money, such as good jobs and whatnot. And when God was calling me into ministry, I remember vividly sitting in my room in Durban, and God was saying, see that rejection that you felt, go establish a church that will not have those kind of rejections, where people can find it easy and accessible to come. And one of the things that we then made as a principle was that I'm not going to wear suits, for example. I'll preach, but I won't wear suits. And I got some slack from senior pastors, from people I respect and I love because of that. But I realized they don't understand. A lot of people leave the church because they don't feel welcomed. And I think it's noble of you guys to then say, listen, we want to accommodate people, to make people, wherever we go, let them find a community, because that's key. I can't live a life without having community. But anyway, I'm a pastor. Let's go into politics. One of the things that you do, which I've since picked up from your conversations with me that you're passionate about, is your political journey. Tell us about that.
I really wouldn't refer to it as a political journey for many reasons. The main reason being, for me, this has always been centered around leadership as opposed to politics, because politics would be a different thing. Politics is me saying, I'll buy you sweets if you do this for me. Leadership, on the other hand...
Politicians are liars.
Those are not my words. But it started a long time ago, really. I've always been a leadership enthusiast. And when I was in high school, I mentioned earlier that I was into debate and public speaking. And there was a time where I was elected as the president for the English club. And then further to that, when I was in Form 5, I was made a head girl. And I think that's the part where this really started, that, this is the way to go. And so when I got to university, I was elected again as an information and publicity officer. And I think now the leadership and a touch of politics sort of came into, because now there's with elections, we don't just point you. You need to have interactions with people. People need to know you. People need to love you. There need to be something about you that makes you stand out from that other person you're competing against. And so those are some of the things that I did. But then eventually I realized that my leadership style, I would rather want it to be centered around the people, because the whole reason why you are where you are, leading people, doing whatever that you're doing, is so that you will serve that other person. But unfortunately, as we progress and the positions come, we forget about those things, and it becomes just about you, just about the money, just about getting to the next position and all of that, when ideally it was just about to serve that other person, because the reason why you are there, particularly in the political space, is because you were elected into that. And so for me, it has been that. And so after I left office in the students association thing, I joined joined other youth-led organizations in Zambia that were mainly focused on helping out. There's one that I joined. It's called the Progressive Action Network. It was called the Progressive Youth Initiative. And what these guys did is they used to focus on the SDGs 3 and 4, where they were concerned about health and quality education. So they would go into communities and find some things that they would do. They would get contributions, and I really found that interesting because as you live your life and you have your aspirations and you do whatever you do, it's easy to then get swallowed in this idea that life is just about me. I'm supposed to progress. I'm supposed to do this and that. But there's somebody else who is around you who does not have those privileges. Would it be so bad for you to extend a hand and help those people in whatever ways that you can? And so for me, that's how it started. And then with exposure to that, I joined what we call the Be Relevant Leadership Academy. It's a Zambian leadership academy that trains young people on leadership skills, design thinking, critical thinking, analytical thinking, and all of that, financial literacy. And, of course, it linked me with other young people who are, in these spaces. And eventually there was an opportunity to apply for the SADC Youth Parliament, which was the third parliament. And by God's grace, I got picked.
Let's go to the SADC Parliament now. Were you picked as a representative from Zambia or as a representative from Eswatini?
It was a representative from Eswatini, but they also wanted you to be living in any SADC country. It's okay, but you represent your nationality.
Ah, okay. And tell us about that experience. What is it like to be there interacting with all these leaders from the respective different countries?
It's quite an experience. Like I mentioned earlier, everything is an opportunity for growth. Because eventually, generally in anything, if you're applying for something or if you're competing for something, and when you get picked, the idea is, I should be good enough. That's why I got picked. But when you eventually get into the spaces, you realize there's actually a lot of work to do. Because when you get there, you realize that people who are so competitive and they're so good at what they do, and they're passionate about the things that they do, and they're doing so much for their people, it often is an inspiration for you to, grow a little more, to do so much more, because, there's also that. But with interacting with other people, from other nationalities, honestly, it has been an inspiration, like I'm saying, because most of these young people, like for instance, our Speaker of the Parliament, he also works with the government. I'm not sure what he does. I just forgot. But, he's doing so much for his community. He's a very active young person who's doing so much for the young people. And you can see genuinely that whatever he's doing in the parliament, it's for the people. And so it becomes interesting to learn so much, because as we are all there, not all of us have the same aspirations. Other people are there because eventually they want to become a president at some point. Others are there because they wish to advance a certain area of their lives. It could be a department of, their leadership styles, or it could be the organizations that they work with, that they wish to make collaborations with, and further those agendas. But it has been quite an experience of growth and exposure, most certainly. And it also helps you to be able to link up other people that whom, I'm not interested in entrepreneurship, but I know someone who is. And so you link them up with those opportunities. And I think that's the hallmark of being there, to be honest, to be able to help other people by you being there. That's why God gives us opportunities, not for you. It's never about you, but it's for somebody else around you who needs that more than you do.
How many Swazis are part of this SADC Parliament, Youth Parliament?
They were picking two individuals from each country, so there's 2 of us from Eswatini.
Is that a male or female?
It's male, female, male, female, male, female. He's a male.
Okay. And how long is each term?
4 years.
4 years. And in the 4 years, that broke me asking, are there any financial incentives for being part of this initiative, or it's just voluntary based?
Yeah, absolutely. Depending on whatever cluster you're aligned in, for instance, I'm aligned with health because that's what I do. You find that there are certain, conventions or conferences or whatever meetings, high engagement meetings that you're invited to, and you get some financial support for that. We also we have been introduced to the Ministry of Sports, Arts and Culture and linked to the Youth Council. And so those are some of the people that we work with. And whenever there's an opportunity to do something, of course, you do get a little incentive for that.
A lot of people say that the church has no role in politics. It's an assertion that I tend to not subscribe to, based on my understanding of politics being a way of life. in your view, having gone to the extent of serving in the SADC Youth Parliament, do you think the church has a role in parliament, in politics?
I know that there's a lot of opinions surrounding that, but here's what I believe. God has need for his people everywhere. And wherever God's people are, it shapes the future of that particular place. And so if the church did not have a role in politics, then imagine what the countries would look like being led by unbelievers. And so in my opinion, God has need for Christians everywhere. And in politics, definitely the church has a role to play, because if, let's say, for instance, God forbid today, they banned Christianity because they're not Christians who are there, how would we then feel and respond to that? Because as a church, we have decided that we are not going to partake in this. And when you read the Bible in the stories in the past, and you read about when Pharaoh was a king, the King Xerxes in the Esther story, you realize that there was a part where a Christian somewhere played a role and influenced how certain decisions were executed. Of course, they were not in power, they helped, and that should mean that God has a need for Christians there. And so if you are exposed and you have an opportunity and you have a zeal and you have a passion for it, I would say that go for it. But of course, be careful not to fall, because we know these spaces are very, they're very tough, to be honest, and you need to have a backbone, and you need to be strong in your faith, but most importantly, you need to belong somewhere in terms of fellowship, and where you always go to and find more strength and growth in that, because it helps cement your rootedness in Christ.
I find it interesting. I think a practical example of how the church can influence politics, I'm looking at with the recent results of the United States of America's presidential race. Trump was elected.
Yeah.
And predominantly, when we look at who voted for Trump, it's what in America we'll call the evangelicals. I'll prefer to use the term Christians, because they want to espouse and push for their own values. And he is a man who wanted to push those values. So as a church, we have a role to play. And how do you find that? Do you find it easy when you get to these platforms to then espouse your Christian values, whether you call them Christian values at that level or not? But do you have the platform to say, listen, this is what I believe in, and this is the value that I want to push for?
Well, to be quite honest, I believe that everything rests in prayer and asking God for power and grace, because, when you get to these places, it's not everything that you say that will go. It's not always, because also it depends on what level you're at. There's also that. But of course, averagely, let's say you do have the power to do most of these things. But there are also certain laws and systems that govern or surround the way of doing things. And sometimes it may be difficult to overrule those things. And that's the part where the prayer comes in, and that's the part where, as a politician, like I mentioned, there's a lot of human relations that goes on. And so you need to be able to influence the people that you're working with in a Christian manner that changes the way that they think, or also makes them see the light in Christian values. That's the only way that you can be able to infuse some of these things. But most importantly, whether or not you're able to advance these agendas is dependent on how much you pray, because it's very easy for you to get swallowed, but for you not to get swallowed depends on how much you pray. And also, do you make an active effort to infuse these values amongst the people that you work with? Because they are the ones who also help make sure that whatever it is that you wish to advance actually comes to pass. And that essentially is what it centers about: people management, and being able to make sure that they also believe in the same things that you believe. Because if they don't, what makes you think that they'll go ahead and advocate for what you're advocating for?
What's your leadership? I know you don't want to call it politics. What's your leadership aspirations going forward? Ultimately, you'll be working as a medical personnel, but in terms of your leadership, how far do you want to go?
To be honest, I haven't thought that far, but I'm trusting God to lead me wherever He does. Because, like I mentioned earlier, before I got to the parliament part, it's not like I already had a trajectory of where I wanted to go. But it was more of whatever opportunities I received, I made sure that I did the most of it. And it has been amazing to see where God has led me with all of that. But I would be lying if I said I have a certain vision concerning this. I am just gracefully accepting whatever God comes my way and doing the best that I can, and understanding that at the end of the day, it's really not about me.
What legacy would you like to leave? I know I look at Mother Teresa. Probably she would. I know you're going to give me one of her answers that, hey, I live my day, I touch lives, I don't care what I. But honestly speaking, when you in light of all the needs and the abilities that you have, the needs that people have out there, and the abilities that God has endowed you with, what sort of legacy would you like to leave behind 50, 30, 70 years from now, or even 300 years from now?
300 is a long time. But the sort of legacy that I would love to leave behind is one that has demonstrated very strong Christian values to begin with. Because at the end of the day, after you die, none of the things that you had will matter, but where you are going will matter. And so the legacy I would love to leave behind is one that has demonstrated Christian values in all of the spaces that I have been entrusted with, but most importantly, to have touched a lot of human lives, and not only in helping them in whatever needs that they did have, but also infusing in them the beliefs that in a world that is constantly changing with different trends and all of these things that we are seeing, it is still possible to serve God wherever you are and serve Him sincerely and not make it about you, but allow yourself to just be a vessel, merely transcending what God wants to do through you. And I would hope that my legacy would be a symbolization that represents that it is possible to do those things even in the spaces that we currently, in the times that we live in. And God is very happy about such things.
When are you finishing your medical studies?
I have 2 years to go.
2 years to go.
Yeah.
Are you planning on coming back to serve at home?
I would love to. Honestly, I would love to, but I'm also open to any other options that I would have.
And I just wanted to say, as somebody that knows you at a personal level, I'm proud of the work that God is doing through you and the person that you've become over the years. I know that there are a lot of kids that went through Chugazakali that would today look at you and be like, whoo, we're so proud of you. A lot of teachers that taught you then. And I'm sure, maybe here's the thing. What is the role that the church has played in your life to get you to where you are, your local church?
One of the things that I hold so dearly that I've learned from the local church is God blesses those who work there with their two hands. Because what I've observed with Christians, I've also been guilty of that, is that we like to pray a lot. We pray about everything, and that's the way to go. But we also like to think that I can just pray and sleep, and things will just work them out. Exactly. God is a God of miracles. He can just lift a finger and this will happen. But one of the things that I hold so dearly is the fact that God blesses those who work with their hands. And so, like the story of Moses, when God called Moses, the first thing He asked him is, what are you carrying? And so there needs to be something that you are doing that God will be able to bless. He cannot then forcefully take something and put it in your hands and force you to do that. You need to have something in your hands for God to be able to bless and advance that. And I think that's the role mainly that the church has helped me, or like rather the perspective that I've held from my background in the church, that God blesses whatever you do with your hands, whatever work that you do, He blesses. But if there's nothing that you're doing, what is God supposed to do?
Social media?
I am on LinkedIn as Khanyisa Nhlabatsi, but I also have preferably email, kbmandini@gmail. Facebook and Instagram, currently I'm not using them for my own personal reasons, but LinkedIn and email.
Has Circle of Light, does it have socials?
Absolutely. We have an Instagram page for now, and in that Instagram page, it does have our email. Most of the details are found in that particular, that page of ours in Instagram.
Okay. So her Circle of Light is mainly on Instagram for now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, young person at home, I hope that was a blessing to you. I know that this conversation felt like it was short, and we can still learn and glean some of it, godly pearls from Khanyisa, but unfortunately time is against us. And I do believe that next time we'll have part B, and maybe you'll be reporting on how many lives God has touched through her Circle of Light, and what policies you've advanced on behalf of the youth of Eswati at the SADC Youth Parliament. But hey, we're so proud of you and the work that you're doing, and it is indeed an inspiration to some young person at home. Well, young person at home, this is my lot for the day. Till we meet again, nakupenda sana. God bless.